Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
Hello and welcome to this episode of our program. This is Mike Saunders with Marketing Huddle. Today we have with us Tema Frank, who is the chief instigator of Frank Reactions. Welcome to the program, Tema.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So, of course, we have to start off with, what in the world is a chief instigator?
Well, I don't know if I can say what the common translation of that would be on radio, but
Yeah.
But basically my goal is to bring about change in the world and make it a better place.
Yeah, well, and here, let me tell you what I see in that title is it stops you in your tracks and it makes you kind of cock your head sideways and go, what? And then it kind of helps you to pay attention. So as with anything in business and marketing, anything you can do to stand out, chief executive officer or chief operating officer, but chief instigator, that's really interesting. So I like that a whole lot. So tell us the background of your company, Frank Reactions, and what you focus on.
Frank Reactions is all about helping companies profit from the digital era through better customer experiences online and off. So I've worked in various aspects of customer experience improvement for 3 decades and started a company actually in 2001 that was probably the first in the world that did what we would now call omni-channel mystery shopping. So we were testing websites plus all the customer service channels that a company offered. And so we still are very much focused on what can companies do to improve in each of the areas that they need to improve to deliver consistently great customer experiences, and as a result of that, get greater profits.
Yeah, I love that because I think that's we're kind of at the cusp of customer experience, and I think that's so many times people think customer service is that worn out term, but I think customer experience and customer journey is really critical. And I had last week on my show Jay Baer, who I'm sure you're familiar with, and he says that by 2020, customer experience will be more important to consumers than price. What do you think of that positioning statement?
I think in many cases that's already true. It's obviously there's always going to be a segment of the public that is price sensitive and will buy strictly on the basis of price. There's always going to be a role in the world for places like Walmart. But the problem is if you're running a business, it's going to become, and is already becoming, increasingly difficult to compete on price, because no matter what you create, within a very short period of time, there are going to be cheap imitations out if it's any good, if it's something people want. And so competing on price is just not effective as a strategy anymore. And competing on customer experience really, really is, because so few companies do it well.
Yeah, and that kind of leads me into the next question, which is so many companies think that they're doing it well, but they don't. And I think that you say 80% of companies think they offer superior customer service, but only 8% of customers agree. That's a pretty big gap.
It's a huge gap. And, the problem is that organizational leaders tend to be removed from customer reality. So especially as organizations grow, the people who are leading them get further and further away from the front lines who are actually interacting with customers and from the customers themselves. So if you're just looking at short-term financial results for a little while, you can think everything's fine. But it hides brewing customer experience problems that can end up sinking you if you're not paying attention and if you're not making a constant effort to stay in touch with what your customers really think.
Yeah, that's pretty huge, and I think too that about the time that you think that you have that 80%, if you feel like you're fall into that 80%, that's when you just need to put the foot down on the pedal and just keep going further and further, because too many times we think we're there and we move on to the next fire in our business, and if we're not there, and you know what? I think that you even run a risk of, as a business, surveying and asking your customers about what they feel like their experience is. Because I think that too many times, if it's an online survey, they'll just check the box. If it's a phone call, they'll just tell you what you want to hear to get you off the phone because they either are busy or they don't want to hurt your feelings. So is there an aspect of gauging your customers' view of your customer experience that you need to just make sure that how can you ensure that you're getting good data?
Well, there are a variety of approaches, and it depends partially on the size of your organization and whether you've got 3 customers or 3 million customers, obviously. But I think, first of all, on a phone call, especially if it's a scheduled phone call, people are more willing to be honest with you. But the key there is don't interrupt. So if you actually want to get some real feedback from customers, schedule a time to chat with them. Best, if you've got a larger pool of customers, is set up a customer advisory panel. And it's funny because often your harshest critics are the best people to put on those advisory panels because they care enough to give you feedback. And by going to them and saying, look, it's obvious that you've got strong feelings. We'd really value having your expertise on a more regular basis. Would you be willing to join a customer advisory panel? You're likely to turn those critics into some of your biggest helpers. So
yeah, and that's just like how Seth Godin teaches in Tribes, his book about tribes, because you're wrapping your arms around and casting a wide net around your customers, your best customers, and then they feel more engaged in your brand. And it's kind of like those radio stations that want to have the listeners on a little panel or whatever they would call it, where they're going to play the music that the customers want to hear. Well, in business, shouldn't we want to make adjustments based on customer feedback? And if it's not just a survey, but if I'm on a panel and, wow, that sounds pretty important, and maybe you work it out to be a pretty important thing, and maybe there's a small gift that you'll give to them, whatever that might be, whether it's tangible or a discount or honoring them or recognizing them on your website somehow. I think those things can be really, really huge. And then here's what I think that you're about to say, which is then implement the advice that they give you. Absolutely.
Yeah. And in terms of customer panels, some of the most powerful motivators, well, first of all, is simply seeing that, as you say, that you implement what they suggest. But there are also some really interesting things. People love feeling like insiders. So if you're giving your panel, I write in People Shock, I give an example of Indigo, which is a big Canadian bookstore chain, and their customer panel, they will give them advance access to new things that they're trying. So they feel like, hey, we're the ones who get this first try at this. We're the first ones to see this. In other companies, I can't remember which was one of the car manufacturers, I think, or possibly an airline, and they would actually fly some of their panelists into the factory and let them have factory tours and let them talk to the engineers on the line. And that feeling of being a part of something is tremendously motivating to people.
Yeah, I think that's really, really huge. Can you give an example of an offline customer experience example? Because I think that we can envision like an online customer experience example because we're so used to the digital, but what would a good example for a brick-and-mortar company be?
Oh, there are tons of great examples. And I think what's happening with the brick-and-mortar is increasingly people will go to a brick-and-mortar store for the experience. So, if you're just buying standardized products that people can buy online, what's the point in them bothering going to a store? So there are stores now, for instance, some of the sporting goods stores where they'll have a climbing wall inside the store. So you not only get to try the mountain equipment that you were thinking of buying, you actually get to really try it by climbing a wall in the store. That just gives it a level of fun and excitement that makes people want to go. Or high-end fashion stores that bring in edgy bands to play. I mean, there are all kinds of things you can do that create fun events in your store and give people a reason to want to go there.
Yeah, that's being remarkable, which is having something in your story, in your image, in your brand that's worthy of being remarked about. Otherwise, you give out little trinkets or nothing, or just friendly. I think that too many companies feel like they're giving a good customer experience because they smile and give good customer service. And these days, that's barely getting your foot in the door.
That's right. It's a good place to start. You need to be there. It's a minimum, but it's not the maximum.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, you talk in People Shock about the 3P profit formula. And I know that, people like Marcus Lemonis talks about, those alliterations and letters and, people, process, and profit. So what are your 3Ps?
Okay, well, they're similar. So, and I debated 3Ps or 4 because, of course, the fourth would be profit. But basically, profit comes from a good combination of promise, people, and process. So by that, I mean, first of all, the promise is, what is it that we exist to do? Who do we exist to serve? Why are we doing what we're doing? And you try and crystallize that into something so simple that it's highly memorable for both your staff and your customers and inspirational for them. And if we have time, I can get into some examples that I give in the book about how even a company as unexciting, let's say, as a janitorial service company, found a way to come up with an inspirational promise. So the promise.
Why don't we cover that one right there? Because that sounds very interesting.
Okay, so it's a company called Jancoa. And of course, in janitorial services, there's a huge staff turnover issue. It's, as the owner, Mary Miller, said to me, nobody grows up wanting to be a janitor. Mm-hmm. And so they were dealing with all these turnover issues. And they took a closer look and realized a couple of things. First of all, that part of the reason staff weren't showing up to work was they lived in remote areas with poor transit service, and they didn't have cars. And so, you're trying to go to a night shift somewhere, and the bus only comes once every hour, and sometimes it just doesn't come. Surprise, surprise, you're going to be late or you're going to be a no-show. So the first thing they did is they bought a van and started providing a shuttle for employees to get them to work, which in itself is pretty impressive that they did that. But what was exciting was, at first, it was the CEO himself who was driving that van. And when he saw where people lived, and he realized these people have no hope, they have no dreams. And so they decided that their mission was to help their employees have and achieve their dreams. And so whether that dream was earning enough to be able to buy a house one day, or to buy a car, or to send their kids to university or college, their goal was that. Once they developed that as their mission, it meant that their employees got so inspired by this mission and by the possibilities that they cared a lot more about doing a good job. So turnover rates went down, customer service quality went way up. So even though the dream and the promise was not so much about we will deliver the best, cleanest office buildings in town, which is important, but it wasn't inspirational. So there was
a reason behind it. There was a why behind it, and then that is a attraction factor. It draws you toward that goal.
Absolutely. So it also meant they got to be much pickier about who they hired, because all of a sudden people really wanted to work there. Mm-hmm. So that's a great example of a promise situation.
Nice.
The second P is people, and there I divided into internal people and external people. So internal is your staff. And obviously, if you do not have happy, satisfied staff, they're not going to create happy customers. Whether they sabotage things intentionally or unintentionally, the fact is you need happy, satisfied staff in order to have happy customers. So I talk in there about some of the ways of accomplishing that. But the other people, the external people, we always talk about customers and prospects, but we often forget that there's this whole other range of people who matter, like your suppliers, your distributors, your funders, all these other people. Those people relationships need to be really solid and positive as well. So if a supplier runs into a supply problem, if you've got a good relationship with them, you're going to be the one who gets some of that limited supply. If you don't, sorry, you're out of luck. And if you're out of luck, your customers are out of luck. So those relationships are really important as well. And then the third P is process. And this is where I find that a lot of organizations fall down. And the process, you need to take a look, and you should be doing this on a regular basis, from the customer's perspective. from the time where they first start thinking, I could use a product or service like that, through to their first contacts with you, they're ultimately buying from you, and the post-purchase experience. What could you do to improve the processes to make it work better for them? And what's exciting is making it work better for the customers almost always results in increased efficiency and effectiveness internally as well, and greater staff satisfaction, because often the things that are frustrating to staff are the same things that are leading to bad customer experiences. So it all ties together with the promise, people, and process to create a system that just works a lot better and is ultimately much more profitable.
Yeah, it really does. I just love how those connect up together, and an excellent example with your janitorial case study there. Yeah. What would you say is the most important thing a listener or a business could do that maybe they're not doing right now? Because you hear all these things and you think, where do I start? And I literally just this past weekend finished reading the book called The One Thing, and it really focuses on what is that thing you can do right now to move you closer to a goal in whatever area you're focusing on. So what would you say would be one thing that someone could take away from this interview and implement?
That is an excellent question. And I would say that one thing is get out there and talk to your customers. Just really talk to them. Have some in-depth conversations. Doesn't have to be, even a statistically valid sample of your customers. Just every week, make sure that people at all levels in your organization are having customer interaction. And really at the senior level, just pick a random sampling of your customers every week and make some calls to them or invite them for coffee and spend half an hour and just really coming to grips with what they're actually experiencing and also what they're seeing on the horizon. What might cause them to leave you? What are they seeing elsewhere that they wish you offered? So those conversations, I think, are the most important thing you can do.
Excellent. That's super, super great advice. And so what is the best way that listeners can reach out and learn more about you? Is there a preferred website that you would point them to?
Sure. If they go to frankreactions.com, they'll find all kinds of information about me. And also there's a section there about the book, or they can just go to peopleshock.com, which will take them to the same place. And if they want to read even just the beginning part of the book, if they just go to Amazon and look up People Shock, usually it shows up better if you do it all as one word, but it should show up either way. And there they can read the first part of the book as well.
Excellent. Well, Tema, thank you so much for your time. It was wonderful getting to know you on this interview.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.